Welcome to Our Curious Amalgam, the weekly podcast brought to you by the Antitrust Law Section of the American Bar Association. Our Curious Amalgam explores the fascinating and increasingly overlapping world of competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law. Each week, we bring you leading global experts on the most compelling issues of the day. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Our Curious Amalgam. I'm Alicia Downey, and the title of today's episode is What's Happening in Germany and Portugal? Catching up with international enforcers at the 2025 Spring Meeting. With almost 4,000 registrants from 70 countries, the 2025 Antitrust Law Section Spring Meeting was truly global. During this year's meeting, the Our Curious Amalgam team recorded interviews with senior competition agency enforcers from around the world, including Germany and Portugal. In the first segment of this episode, James Hunsberger speaks with Andreas Mundt, the longtime president of Germany's Federal Cartel Office. After that, Jeny Maier interviews Nuno Cunha Rodrigues, the president of the Portuguese Competition Authority. You'll hear what's been happening in their respective agencies, as well as a little bit about what makes them happy outside of competition law. Enjoy the conversations.
Hello, my name is James Hunsberger, and today I am talking with Andreas Mundt, president of the Bundeskartellamt. The Bundeskartellamt, also known as the Federal Cartel Office, or the FCO for short, is the agency that enforces German and European competition laws in Germany. Andreas Mundt has been the president of the Bundeskartellamt since 2009. President Mundt is also the chair of the steering group of the International Competition Network, a position he has held since 2013. Welcome to Our Curious Amalgam, President Mundt.
Hello, James. Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about a few different subjects, but let's kick it off with what would you say are your agency's three most significant accomplishments or initiatives over the past 12 months?
Yeah, I think the most important things for the time being are cases in areas where we haven't been until now, uncharted territory, so to say. We are in full swing of implementing Section 19A. You know, in Germany, unlike the European Union, we do not have regulation on digital markets, digital companies, but what we do have is a specific law, competition law for digital markets. Under this law, you designate certain companies to be subject to this new section, Section 19A, and now we are in full swing to implement that. We have designated 5 companies, the big techs, the usual suspects, so to say, and now we have ongoing proceedings against these companies under this section. That is a huge task because there's little jurisprudence on that. You do that for the first time, so you have to do it carefully. You have to anticipate what does the court want you to spell out here. What do they want you to do? I think that this is a key priority for the time being, of course. Secondly, we have a new tool, the new competition tool. You might have heard of that. That is a tool by which you can intervene in markets where you do not really have an infringement of competition law, but where you find a malfunctioning of markets. That is a tool that also the UK always had at hand. Some would wish for that. We got it since a couple of months. Yeah, it's just months. And we have introduced a first proceeding in this area. First, we did a sector inquiry on the fuel markets, the wholesale markets for fuel. And now we have indeed initiated a proceeding here to see in how far there is a malfunctioning on these markets. And thirdly, I would say I'm very happy to say we're back on track with cartel enforcement. It was difficult during COVID. There were few inspections, few dawn raids. We had few cases. We have caught up now, and I always believe that cartel enforcement is so incredibly important because that is part of our legitimacy as competition agencies. and the Bundeskartellamt. We got the word cartel in our name. That is quite unique worldwide. So that matters a lot to me, that we have a very good track record here on cartel enforcement. And last but not least, for me personally, the ICN always matters very much. As the ICN chairman, it's my task to keep that huge group together. The ICN has 140 members today from all over the world, very heterogeneous views. We are a consensus organization, and to bring all this together and to produce good documents, good working papers, that is a personal achievement. At least I hope so. But it matters a lot to me personally.
That's really interesting, and appreciate that overview. For our U.S. listeners who may not be as familiar with the new competition tool, have you come up with any criteria for deciding which markets to investigate using that tool?
I mean, it's a tool that is not easy to apply. Let's put it this way. The proceeding is extremely lengthy. We have to start that with a sector inquiry, which we did in the area of the fuel markets, wholesale of fuel. We have to finish that sector inquiry within 18 months. And then we go into the second step, and we open an investigation, a proceeding, looking at companies that contribute to that malfunctioning of the market, if we find it on that market. Then we have to finish that proceeding, and the companies at which we have been looking at have the right to go to court against that decision that they are part of that malfunctioning of the market. And last but not least, when we impose measures on these companies or certain remedies, they can go to court again, which means such a proceeding might take 7-8 years, which means at the same time we have limited resources. I'm pretty sure we will not see very many proceedings in this area. And this is why I think it would be a bit premature to develop a certain pattern or to develop criteria on which we would base our decision in which markets we go. For the time being, I'm very happy that we have one case, and maybe this will be the case for some time now. And as I said, limited resources force us to look very carefully at where we are active.
That's very interesting, and appreciate your perspective on that, and we'll all be watching and see what happens in that investigation. What would you say are your agency's top current enforcement priorities?
Well, very broad, you could say. It's cartel enforcement, merger control, and abuse control. I very much like always going back to these roots, because this is our main task, But of course, within these areas, you have certain priorities. If I start with cartel enforcement really matters to me, and I'm very happy that we are back on track there. Last year we had, I think, 10 inspections, 10 dawn raids. Luckily enough, we have a rising number of leniency application. All over it was 16 last year. I'm very happy about that. But we have also strengthened our ex officio tools for cartel enforcement. And I think that is extremely important, because only the probability of detection makes company come in for leniency. So we have started to use screening tools, monitoring markets. We have an excellent tool by which we can receive anonymous tips. We have an excellent tool by which we can receive tips and even don't have to reveal the identity of those who gave the tip to the Bundeskartellamt. So that is of great importance, and this is well on the way, let's put it this way. Then the implementation of Section 19A goes to my heart as well. The abuse proceedings against in the digital markets. We have lots of ongoing proceedings: 2 against Google, 2 against Amazon, 1 against Apple. We're looking at the ATTF framework of Apple, the app tracking transparency initiative that Apple has taken up, by which Apple is very serious on data protection when you download a third-party app. Maybe not as serious if you download an Apple app. So we look at this under the headline of self-preferencing. We have 2 Google cases going on by which Google bundles its services which are based on Google Maps, and thus strengthening the position of Google, at least in our view, even in markets that are still competitive or could be competitive. So that's another feature. So Section 19A in general and these cases, they matter a lot and they are very important. The third thing has to do with merger control and a little bit with advocacy. We have a huge debate in Europe about European champions. And the question always is put on the table, do we have to loosen merger control rules, merger control regime? I don't think so. This is also always discussed under the headline of competitiveness. I think competition leads to competitiveness because companies only get strong. They only offer good quality, low prices and innovation when they operate in competitive markets, and that makes them competitive in a way, you know. So this is an ongoing debate. It has a lot to do with advocacy. And I think in this realm, it's a bit my task also to convince policymakers, the business community, everyone that contributes to this debate, that we are on the right track in Germany and that we should keep merger control as it is and not loosen the reins in any sense. Not only in Germany, also at the European level, that we should stick to stringent and consequent merger control.
That's very interesting, President Mundt, and as a member of the Antitrust and Competition Bar, we certainly appreciate all your contributions to the global debates on these issues. On the cartel front, are you seeing mostly domestic cases or also some global cartel investigations that you're looking at?
Well, it's mostly national, of course. In Europe we have a system by which we share competences with DG Comp at the European level, DG Competition. We apply usually European law in this area. So if a case is really concerning more countries within Europe, it would be a case for the European Union. Sometimes we do cases together, national competition agencies in Europe. We had one case in the flower sector many years ago, where we had a very strong cooperation, for example, with the French and the Netherlands competition agency. There were really joint investigations, parallel investigations. We coordinated how we work, what we do, and it worked quite well in the very end. But that is quite unusual. Usually we do look at national cartels, and if it goes beyond the border of Germany, we have at least to coordinate with the European Commission if that would not be a case for them.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that your agency faces at the moment in advancing its mission?
It's always resources. I don't know any agency that has enough resources, but the world is really changing, you know. There is the use of new tools, the question of digitalization that is at hand. So resources matter a lot to me, and to get this done is very important. Secondly, maybe this debate about competitiveness. That is not an easy debate. How we contribute to competitiveness, I mentioned that, but that is an important debate. Thirdly, maybe the digitalization of my agency in general. We know the private sector already makes big use of AI and AI-related instruments and tools. For a competition agency, that is not so easy, at least not for the German one, because AI needs infrastructure, and very often infrastructure is one of the big hyperscalers, and we cannot load the data of the companies in Germany that we are looking at into the cloud. That is not feasible from our perspective. So we have to do many of these things on our own, and that is not easy. Of course, we get it done. We have an excellent IT department in the Bundeskartellamt, which is quite large, and we really tried to get this done, but I think these are some key challenges that maybe I don't face alone, but I think many heads of agencies are facing exactly these problems.
So as we talked about before we jumped on the podcast, you've had a very busy week this week. Is there anything that you've learned at the spring meeting that's been particularly interesting or surprising to you?
Well, nothing surprising, but something that made me quite happy. We had, of course, some talks with the Department of Justice and the FTC, and I was happy to see that despite all these frictions that we see in the world today, I have the impression that we can continue our excellent cooperation with the FTC and the DOJ that we had in the past. I was on a panel with Roger Alford yesterday, the new principal deputy AAG, and he confirmed that they were committed to continue this cooperation. They were committed to continue also some of their cases in digital markets, where we also do our cases. I see commitment at the international level, which is important for the ICN. The DOJ and the FTC have always been strong pillars in the ICN, and the ICN needs strong shoulders. So I'm also very hopeful that we can continue our cooperation in this sense. I think that is the key message that I take home, which came not so much as a surprise, but I'm really happy about the outcome finally, and this is my impression I take home from the ABA meeting.
That's really good to hear. As you just mentioned, you are the chair of the steering group of the ICN. Is there a particular top priority for the ICN going forward this year?
We have taken up our word on artificial intelligence in the ICN. We did that early on. The first tech forum on AI was here in Washington at the invitation of Lina Khan. We have a second forum now on the occasion of the annual conference in Edinburgh, which is just 1 month away. So I'm here at the ABA, but I'm already concentrating on the next conference in Edinburgh. They're pretty close together. I think this will remain a key topic for the ICN because AI is a new tool, in fact, and we all have to learn how to deal with it. Where are the competition problems? And this is excellent work that can be done in the ICN. Besides that, there's much going on. We're looking at the operational framework of the ICN to make it, weatherproof for the upcoming years. We're looking at the merger RPs. So there's lots of stuff where we look at work that we have already done in the ICN, but we have to make it up to date. And I think that is very important. And recommended practices, RPs, are the gold standard of the ICN. So to do work on that is also very important to show how productive the ICN is. I think these are key objectives that we will follow also in the future.
So probably the most difficult question of the day. Do you have any interesting hobbies outside of work?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I usually say I have no hobbies. I work a lot that does not allow for many hobbies. I'm a family man. That's my most important hobby. Secondly, I have a dog that is waiting for me over the weekend to walk the dog. And sometimes when I do home office, my dog walks in, look at me and says, "What are you doing here? And could we just have a walk? Wouldn't that be more interesting than sitting around here?" That is very good. And I started to play golf. Not very successful yet. I'm afraid I have a long way to go here. So I do not know yet if this turns into a hobby. It depends on how successful I'm going to be in playing golf, you see.
That's excellent. Family and dog are my top priorities outside of work, so we have that in common.
Yeah.
And also not very successful at golf, but I give it a shot every now and then.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you very much, President Mundt. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for joining us today on Our Curious Amalgam.
Thanks a lot, and many thanks for the opportunity, and all the best to you.
Likewise. Take care.
Hello and welcome to Our Curious Amalgam. I am Jeny Maier and I am very pleased to be here today with Mr. Nuno Cunha Rodrigues, the president of the ADC, the Competition Commission of Portugal. And I had the pleasure of meeting you here last year, and we are very grateful to have you back. So welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jeny. It's a pleasure to be here since last year. So I'm very honored to be here at the ABA and to be interviewed by you once again. I remember last year we talked about Lisbon, and how was your travel there?
It was amazing, and I was very grateful for all of your wonderful suggestions. And as I was just telling you earlier, ate my weight in pastries. Very big fan of the pastel de nata. So very much looking forward to my next trip, and I will pack them all in my suitcase if I can bring them along.
Yeah, pronouncing it correctly. Congratulations for your Portuguese. It's really pastel de nata that you say in Portugal, so
Excellent.
you're on the right track.
All right. Well, I have that going for me. Well, very glad to have you here today, and wanted to go over a few things and learn what is new in the competition arena in Portugal. And then, as our usual practice here on Our Curious Amalgam, have a few more fun questions and get to know you a little bit better. But to talk about the work that you and your colleagues at the agency are doing, could you tell us perhaps 3 or so of your most important accomplishments or initiatives that the agency has been working on over the course of the last year?
Okay, when it comes to enforcement, I would say in antitrust last year, ADC issued 7 sanctioning decisions in the total amount of 67 million euros in different areas such as the health sector, technology consultancy, commercialization of software, payment services, and audiovisual production. So we have cases that went from abuse of dominant position. It was a case in the form of tying in the leading payment services provider in Portugal. We had cases of no poach in terms of labor markets, which is, I would say kind of a trend all over Europe nowadays. It started in the US, and so we are now investigating and sanctioning several no poach cases and wage fixing. And we had also decisions by business associations. So that's in terms of antitrust. When it comes to merger control, we have a huge activity in terms of merger control. I think you are aware that in Portugal, the thresholds are based not only on turnover, but also on market share. So we had 93 mergers that were analyzed by the authority and decided. 5 of them were approved with commitments, and we had prohibition decisions in the telecom sector. So the third biggest operator in Portugal, Vodafone, wanted to acquire the fourth one, Novo, and we blocked the merger. And after we blocked, this fourth firm was bought by a newcomer, DG. We approved, we cleared the operation. And so we think that by doing that, we contribute to have more competition in the telecom sector in Portugal. When it comes to advocacy, I think I'm proud to say that the Portuguese authorities is one of the leading authorities when it comes to market studies in terms of generative AI. So after last year, we've published the issues paper on the impact on competition and the relation with the generative AI. We have been publishing what we call short papers about the impact of competition in generative AI. We've published one about the relation between data and generative AI, another one about open access, and we hope to publish a new one during the month of May. Also, I cannot tell it now for the moment, but look at the authority and to our website. We'll be publishing it both in Portuguese and English about the relation between and the interplay between competition and generative AI. And also when it comes to internal functioning of the authority, we've been trying to promote the use of new forensic IT tools, namely with the help of artificial intelligence. So we've developed what we call new platforms in order to try to have some help from screening data, namely in public procurement database. We call it the Screen IT. So to use the famous behavioral and structural screening techniques in order to find patterns that help us to grab some tip-offs, to open cases, namely in the famous bid reading classical cases. Also, we have the Scrap IT, which is a technique for web scraping prices online to compare them and to see if there are some cases that we can open based on that. And also the third one is what we call Detect IT. Is a way to catch non-notified operations in terms of gun jumping. So we've been hiring data scientists, IT technicians, so to help us during this job. So we've been hiring new human resources for the authority. We also trying to change our headquarters to a new one that will be ready hopefully in the beginning of the next year. And so that's it.
In the move to the new headquarters, are you going to be looking to hire new lawyers in addition to the IT personnel?
Yeah, we've been doing that currently already, hiring new lawyers. We have an ongoing process to recruit new staff, and so that does not directly hinders the process of having a new headquarter. So we've been doing that currently already. So nothing to do directly with the new headquarters. Yeah.
The investment in the technology capabilities is really very interesting, and it's something that we have heard from the U.S. enforcers, well, in particular, Jonathan Cantor in the previous administration. Is there more of an international move amongst enforcers in multiple jurisdictions to invest more in this area?
Yeah, perhaps you know that cartels are no longer, they don't work the same way as they used to work in the 60s or the 70s. Now you have all this new digital economy. People communicate through in the social networks, through mobile phones, through laptops, so on. So not the classical papers or the gun jumping or the meeting in a bar full of smoke. So we as enforcers, we need to adapt ourselves to this new reality, this new economy. It's always like, I would say, the cat and mouse game, So we have to prepare ourselves with new technology, to use the artificial intelligence, what we can have in order to do our job properly, be enforcers. And that's why I think, I wouldn't call it a movement, but I think that all the authorities are trying to adapt themselves to this new reality.
And we talked, I think, last year about labor markets, and you mentioned just a few minutes ago the work that you all have done in no poach and related labor matters. Are there any other narrow areas, industry areas, sectors that you are looking to focus on in the coming years?
Well, like I said previously, I think that generative AI and AI are really a hot topic that will impact in our societies in the coming years. Also, another trend in Europe is sustainability, and the interplay between sustainability and competition. And for that, the European Commission has issued the guidelines on horizontal agreements, and they have the famous Chapter 9, which deals with that, and we have been also promoting some advocacy in these terms. So what we are doing now is trying to get out of the headquarters of the authority and talk with citizens, talk with small and medium companies, looking for what are their concerns, and trying to explain how competition can help them. What can they do in terms of compliance in order to foster competition and to help the national and the European economy.
What are you hearing from those constituents about what's important to them?
Well, we have different type of complaints, and we go throughout the country. We have a campaign that is called 20 Years, 20 Cities. We go to 20 different cities all over Portugal, and we receive tip-offs that help us to open cases. So we've been opening cases. Other complaints related to barriers to entry, namely in terms of the legislations that is approved in Portugal. So knowing that, we make some studies and we can issue some recommendations to the government, and we'll be doing that. And yes, and we'll be explaining also what they should not do in terms of competition, because many times I think there is no awareness amongst mainly small and medium companies about the harm that the competition can produce if they don't know really the competition law and the impact that it might have in their companies.
You talked about just a minute ago some of the challenges that new technologies pose for catching cartel activity. What other challenges do you see the ADC facing as it executes its mission?
Well, we have new challenges coming from the European Union, and it might be interesting for our audience to know, the famous guidelines on Article 102 on exclusionary abuses that will be, released by the European Commission, hopefully during this year. And I do think they will help to streamline the application of the famous Article 102 in Europe in cases of abuse of position. Another topic in the EU that impacts in our authorities at the national level is the decision that will be taken after the famous Ilminagreil case. In Portugal, I do think that we are better than our colleagues in other member states because, like I said previously, we have the market share threshold, which I do think help us to catch some mergers, for example, some examples of killer acquisitions that might happen, and through the market share we can grab those mergers. But anyway, we are looking if we should have more powers when it comes to merger control, namely call-in powers. There's a huge discussion among member states after Ilminagreil that they should amend their national law in order to have call-in powers. I think you are aware that Italy, now they have changes, so they have already call-in powers. There's a case that is pending now, it is openly discussed, which is NVIDIA. So in Portugal, we are also discussing the possibility to have call-in powers besides the market share, the turnover thresholds, which already work. So those, I would say, are some of the challenges that are now posed for all member states and all the authorities at the European level.
Speaking as a practitioner, the expansion of the call-in powers is something that we're watching very, very carefully. And I know that you have a professorial background. And have you been to any of the panels so far at spring meeting? And has there been anything that has so far interested you or that you've learned today? Yeah,
I try to attend some of the panels, although I don't have much time. I have several meetings ongoing. Just today in the morning we met with Teresa Ribeiro, the commissioner, which is funny to be in DC having a meeting with the European authorities and the commission. But anyway, I think one of the new trends now is the discussion about what I call competition 2.0, or a new ecosystem. It's also a trendy word in terms of competition that we have all over the world. In Europe, we have the DMA, the Foreign Subsidiary Regulation, the AI Act. These are new trends that for a practitioner or a lawyer that was working in the 90s, if it was translated for today's time, it wouldn't understand. So I see the impact that the digital economy will produce in the future. For me, it's one of the most challenging things that we are faced. So I've listened to a panel just yesterday with the Cristina Cafara and several people discussing if the way that competition tackles the concerns that the digital economy poses to us is sufficient or is not sufficient. If we are doing things well or we should do it differently. So I think it's one of the reflections that we have to do. And it was made in Europe, and that's why the DMA came out. That's one of the topics that I was interested in. I listened during these days here at the ABA.
Well, we'll have to get together again next year at the conference, and you can update us on whether we have been able to address those thorny questions any better than we have to date. Thank you for sharing those updates, and as you may remember, our usual way that we like to end our conversation series is to learn a little bit more about you, and I know that last year we learned a lot about your travels and your recommendations, which I very much appreciated about my trip to Portugal. But could you tell us about any hobbies that you have outside of your day-to-day work?
Well, I'm still teaching. I teach one PhD course at the law school, and last year I was happy that I was able to finish a book that I had prepared before joining the authority, so I was able to publish the book. And besides that, I have my family. I have my wife and kids, So I try to spend some quality time with them during the vacations, and also following my older son. He's studying, of course, but he plays American football.
Oh, really?
He's the vice national champion in American football. He plays very well. I don't know nothing about the game. Sorry for saying that. I know you Americans love American football, but I go to see each game of him. I stay, during half of the game looking and trying to understand and trying to catch it. But that's one of my hobbies, I would say, as a father, to follow my son as a player of American football. So it's a connection that I have at the end with the USA, right?
President Rodrigues, thank you, as always. Lovely pleasure to talk to you, and looking forward to next year.
Thank you, Jenny. It's my pleasure to bring some pastel de nata next year so that you can share here.
Absolutely, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Our Curious Amalgam, a competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law podcast. It is produced and shared around the globe by ABA's Antitrust Law Section. The opinions expressed by the participants in this podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent their employer or other organizations. If you like what you heard or would like to become a member of the American Bar Association, please check out what the Antitrust section has to offer at ambar.org/antitrust. You can learn more about our podcast at ourcuriousamalgam.com. If you have comments, suggestions, or podcast ideas, please reach out to us at podcast@ourcuriousamalgam.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.